Cool.
So I was listening to okay, so let's just set this up a little bit, because I'm outraged on behalf of Jordan Chariton. What's happening to their YouTube channel right now, Status Coup, is completely fucked up. It's so ridiculous that I went and looked at it, and I was checking it out today, and you know, I was looking at it and I was like, damn, their view count is like remarkably similar to the Vanguard. And I was like, this has to be broken. Because, like, one, Jordan Chariton is a professional fucking journalist that has been at this shit for, you know, probably a decade. He's been covering the Flint story for 5 years. He has had the platform of TYT. So it's like, if Gavin and I, being two dudes that are doing this, and obviously we're happy and grateful for the growth that we've been experiencing recently, but at the end of the day, I could guess that there was something algorithmically fucked up, that a channel with 103,000 subs was live and had like 150 people watching. And you're like, wait, you're talking to a premier journalist, and you're a premier journalist, and you're live, and you have 100,000. Like, I just know that's not how YouTube math is supposed to work.
Yeah. And if you're wondering why we might not be experiencing the exact kind of suppression, which we certainly are being suppressed in the algorithm, but seemingly not to the same extent. And my theory on that is because while we like to talk shit, we're not actually, you know, necessarily exposing people in the same kind of way that someone like Jordan Sheridan is really shining a light on the corruption.
Which is why we have to speak out for him.
Exactly. But yeah, I mean, again, we do some reporting here. We just published a piece on our Substack, for example, but like, we're not doing the kind of hard-hitting investigative journalism that someone like Jordan Chariton is on a case like Flint, Michigan, really exposing people like Rick Snyder.
Or you could get sued.
And embarrassing the Democratic Party. Yeah. So he's really doing hard-hitting journalism to the extent that a lot of people on the space are not. Again, he kind of is in the Breadtube space, but he overlaps in a journalist too. He's not just a commentator, and Status Coup is not just like the Majority Report or what fill in the blank, you know, lefty YouTube show. Like, they actually are doing real work. They're doing real journalism and investigative reporting, which again does make it really unfortunate that all that hard work is not being seen by as many people, thanks to the suppression from the YouTube algorithm. And Jordan just, you know, went off on this recently, went on a great bit of a rant that you brought to my attention, Zach, and I thought he really distilled this issue properly and really distilled his rage at the machine.
Yeah, 100%. And so just before we go into like two more things, just one, shout out to Jordan and everybody at Status Coup, friends of the show here at the Vanguard. Jordan was incredibly kind when we spoke to him. And two, yeah, I think that this YouTube algorithm thing I think it's definitely more than, I think he makes this point maybe in this video, but it's more than the algorithm, right? It's selective targeting. They're going after people who are doing the specific kind of reporting that they least want to hear, right? The least, yeah, but anyway, we can let Jordan get into this and we'll react to it.
Yeah, we'll let Jordan take this away. I want to make sure I have the timestamp perfect. I think it's about right here.
Don't care? No, that's not the truth. I'm not on that list. I would love to know what we're down, because we haven't had the time to look. But you tell me, are all of these channels down so substantially because suddenly people have gone back to sleep? Are all of these channels down so substantially because suddenly the progressives in this country don't want to watch the news anymore? Suddenly don't care? No, that's not the truth. They're down because YouTube is pushing them down. And I got to tell you, and I'm just going to say it, and it might lose me some friends, but I don't give a damn. Kyle needs to start talking about this more. Krystal Ball, Sagar, they should talk about this more. Jimmy should talk about this more. We should all be talking about this more. We should all be coming together. And yeah, I am affected way more than any of them. But I'm telling you, and I like all of these people, so this isn't a criticism of any one person. But Kyle, Krystal, Jimmy, all of you, if you think that you're safe, if you think that a day is not coming where they could just get rid of your channel, you're mistaken. You are mistaken. And I want to be clear. I don't think any of these people I'm mentioning, I don't care. Kyle has said things in the past and done videos on what YouTube is doing. Jimmy has clearly. But I think we're at a point now, part of the problem just in America is too many abnormal things have been normalized. You know, whole communities not having clean water for years. That's just normal now. You know, all of our money being stolen and all of our money going from the bottom to the top. That's just the price of doing business here in America. And it's become normalized. It's become normalized that essentially big tech is rigging the entire information system to stuff your feed with Wolf Blitzer, Rachel Maddow, Anderson Cooper, Joe and Mika, and the rest of the usual suspects. And that should be scandalous. It was scandalous when they did it in 2017. It remains scandalous now. And I don't want to say too much, but I happen to know somebody that, lucky enough, literally got a meeting with people from YouTube. It's easier to get a meeting with the CIA than to get anyone from YouTube on the phone. And this person got a meeting recently with YouTube, and YouTube basically gave them a bunch of fucking bullshit. But the real key here is a very clear point. YouTube and Twitter and Twitch and Facebook, they all love to say, no, we're not publishers. We're platforms. We're platforms. We're not publishers. We're not editorial publishers. And they do that so that they won't be regulated. That's what Section 230, which, Trump was tweeting, get rid of Section 230. I don't want to bore you with the details, but Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act basically gives YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, all these platforms blanket immunity for anything published on their site. When I was smeared, if you remember, in 2017, and complete false accusation was made against me, the reason that when I tried to sue the Huffington Post for publishing that false accusation against me, the reason that I basically had to drop it was because the Section 230 law basically protects outlets like the Huffington Post, even if point blank defamation is published on their platforms. They could say, well, in my case, it was a blogger who wrote it, not a full-time employee. But the point is, why should YouTube get away with saying they're a platform and not a publisher if they're making decisions that publishers make? When YouTube decides we're going to elevate, and they said this publicly, they said we're going to elevate authoritative news. They literally said this. It's in a blog post. We're going to elevate authoritative news like CNN and Fox News. Yes, those are the outlets that they used. They left out the rest of it, which was, we're going to bury the rest of you. That's not a platform. That's a publisher. You're making an editorial decision that certain news is more trustworthy, while others, are borderline. If you want to make those decisions, then you should be regulated, because you're no longer operating as a platform. You're operating as a publisher who's making editorial decisions. And you want to know who suffers the most here? Because, Status Coup, I'm just being very clear. Our revenue numbers from February and so far this month are the worst they've ever been on YouTube, including when we started. I think in February, we might have made like $1,500 on YouTube, which is really bad. It's much less than we normally make. And this month, we're down significantly. And why is this important? A, we can't survive with that. But B, who suffers the most? Is it Status Coup? No, it's Flint, Michigan. It's Jackson, Mississippi. It's Texas. It's all of the communities that we've gone because they already don't have anyone covering them. They already barely have eyeballs on their suffering, on the corruption, on the injustice. Already. The true nature and what's actually happening in America, community to community, has no news coverage. And now YouTube's going to bury the only channels that are actually providing that news coverage? You, the viewer, should be outraged about this. Not on behalf of me and Status Coup, because frankly, whether you like me or not everyone does, that's fine. This is not only about Status Coup. It's not only about Secular Talk or Jimmy Dore or any of these. It's about the entire system in the United Corporations of America. You cannot, let me take my glasses off to make a point. You cannot achieve big things legislatively. You cannot achieve big things Socially, you could not achieve big things in terms of a movement if the majority of people have no fucking idea what is going on. I always use my parents as an example. Anecdotal, but it's a good example. They both voted for Trump. They're not bad people. They're just very politically misinformed. Okay? And my dad watches a lot of Fox News. With that said, when they saw the videos that I was doing at Standing Rock, when they've seen the reporting that I've done in Flint, you know what their first response has always been to me? Why isn't this on CNN? Why doesn't like the New York Times cover this? Why is this happening and no one's talking about it? My parents are the typical reaction you will get. Most people, and I always say this, and a lot of people think I'm cheesy, most people in this country are actually not lacking compassion. Most people in this country have no fucking idea what's happening. That's the truth. And that's what I've learned traveling this country. Most people, when they find out, whether it's the water, whether it's police brutality, whether it's state governments being grossly corrupt, whether the police, when most people, even Republicans in a lot of cases, when they actually see what's happening, when they're actually informed, they ain't happy about it. And they want change. But the truth is, they don't know about it. You want to know why? Because when we're live from a 1-year anniversary rally for Breonna Taylor's murder, we're getting 100 viewers. We have 108,000 subscribers. We got 120 viewers at the most for a 4-hour live stream. John was live for 4 hours. How are you supposed to get justice? How are you supposed to get change if nobody fucking knows what's going on? So, I don't know. You tell me, am I being dramatic? Because I got to tell you something. I'm tired of this being normalized. And if what I'm doing right now gets me kicked off YouTube, then so fucking be it. Because somebody's got to say it. Somebody's got to start screaming about this. I am sick of working 7 days a week and building this company from the ground up for YouTube and Silicon Valley overlords to bury this work. Because you're not just hurting me and you're not just hurting my viewers. You're hurting the country. Jordan, you got to smoke some weed with Jimmy. I'd love to smoke some weed. But let me read some comments, get your thoughts on what I'm saying. But I will be clear. I will be clear. I do not want people to, I don't want people at all to question, because I want to be very clear. Right now, I'm calling out every single independent media host. Every one of you, even ones that I'm friends with, start talking about this. Start raising hell. Frankly, even the bigger channels that aren't affected as much, start raising hell. Because it ain't just about status quo. And it ain't just about you. It's about, do we live in a country or do we live in a big tech overlord monopoly?
Well said.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, one, that was really inspiring, Jordan. Phew, killing it, man. Shout out to you, dude. But yeah, I guess this is Gavin and I heeding that call, right? You know, the fact that YouTube wants to both claim the fact that they're just a platform that's not making any decisions and also dictate, you know, who gets seen, promote what content is promoted, all those kinds of things. Those are editorial decisions. You can't have your cake and eat it too. So this should already be against the law, right? Because they're essentially, what they're doing is they are they're manipulating the current legislation that protects them, but they're not following the law that would allow them to get away with it. Essentially, that's a clumsy way of putting it. Essentially, what's happening is they are able to get away with what they're doing as a business by saying they don't take an editorial position and an editorial stance on how things are promoted or whatever. But clearly, that's not the case. Clearly, they are having an editorial hand in what's being promoted. That's obvious after you, listen to Jordan, but just take a look at his channel and what's happening to him and all kinds of other places, right? And we've talked about it, friend of the show, Frank Analysis, completely demonetized you know, and then had his growth really shuttered. So this is, I mean, this is a real issue, and it's up to everybody to talk about it.
Yeah, it really is. And again, like you said, shout out and solidarity to Jordan and everyone at Status Coup. They're really doing some great work. And if you're not already, make sure to go check them out and you know, subscribe and watch their journalism, because they really are platforming some of the best, you know, backpack independent journalism that's being platformed, at least on this platform right now. So again, super big shout out to Jordan. Again, he's been on our show, and we think he's just one of the best voices in the space. I've been watching him for a while, and I was just so pissed off when he was essentially fired from TYT for ridiculous reasons. And you know, we were talking a little bit earlier. It was kind of like one of the first signs that TYT was really going downhill. And for me, it was one of the first huge red flags that they would sacrifice someone with that much talent and basically cut off his platform, because at the time his videos were getting seen by so many people. So they really did kind of sacrifice one of their best elements, and that really, you know, that was a big red flag for me. And ever since then, I've been following Jordan's reporting just to make sure that, you know, one more person is supporting his work and the work that's being done. But yeah, this is ridiculous. And it certainly is true that, you know, after an election, and certainly now that Biden is in office, you know, all media is down, even the mainstream networks, MSNBC, it's off a cliff, right? Because, you know, Trump was such a shit show, and then all of a sudden now we have Joe Biden, who's the opposite in every way. And also, it is worth saying that a lot of the channels in this space were kind of built on the Bernie Sanders momentum, and now that there is none of that remaining, it is a little bit harder to find a new lane.
That doesn't explain why.
Well, hold on.
Majority Report is growing.
Hold on, but again, there's no doubt that YouTube is fucking the small channels that are actually speaking truth to power, and there's no doubt that, you know, that's playing into this. But yeah, again, I think Jordan Chariton just made such a great point there. So yeah.
I mean, one of the things that strikes me as interesting, and I don't think like a show like Rising was not featured on Jackson Hinkle's report on who was losing and bleeding subscribers, and they stood out as the one show that Jordan referenced that wasn't independent, right? Yeah. So everybody, like, Bad Faith
he referenced Krystal Ball, not necessarily the Rising.
He said Krystal and Sagar, but yeah.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, sorry.
He said Krystal and Sagar should be talking about this. Gotcha. I think he says Krystal twice and Sagar just the one time when he brings it up the first time. But anyway, it doesn't matter. What they even on their show, I caught saying that they were covering the plummet of news ratings, right? And they were talking about like how you know, each of these shows had fallen X, Y, and Z, and Sagar actually explicitly pointed out that this was not happening to Rising. Yeah. And I wonder if that's because they are getting the Hill's corporate friendly treatment, right? They are, and I wonder if that's why they feel a sense of comfort there in the Hill, because, you know, obviously the Hill's over 1 million subs now. It seems like the gatekeeping that YouTube has established 100%. Is that if you're like a dissident independent voice, it's going to be impossible for you to get over 1 million subs. That's why Kyle Kulinski's been at like 955,000 subs forever. Like,
yeah, well, I mean, Rising in particular, and Krystal and Sagar as an extension have just benefited so massively from being associated with a corporation in the Hill, and that's not to diss them at all. I think that Rising is probably one of the best shows currently on a quote unquote mainstream news platform. So I'm not trying to, you know, throw shade at that project. I think it's great. You know, I watch it. So again, but I do think it's true that, you know, being on that corporate platform and having that clear advantage over the rest of us, it is incumbent on them to make this point and stand up for people like Jordan Chariton, who are doing really great work. And again, who aren't just sitting there pontificating, who actually are out in the field. Because again, if you were around in the Bernie 2020 era, I speak like that was not a year ago, but if you remember, it was like all of a sudden YouTube started suggesting videos of Krystal and Sagar. It wasn't really an organic emergence. It was purely algorithmic. And it's because the Hill is a corporation. Again, if Krystal and Sagar had just started a YouTube channel where they were sitting in their, you know, studio in their basement talking about leftist or talking about politics in general from a populist perspective, they might certainly catch some traction. But to assume that they'd be at the subscriber number that they are now, and again, the Hill has other stuff, but that's clearly the main attraction. Anyway, the point is they wouldn't be anywhere near where they are as far as growth if it weren't for the fact that YouTube treats the Hill differently than a channel like Status Coup or the Vanguard, because again, we don't have a corporate backing. And, you know, if one of us says something that's out of line, like Matt Taibbi and Katie Halper just did, no one can pull the plug on us and remove our ability to connect with a larger mainstream platform or audience.
Yeah, which I think is kind of the exchange, right? Like at the end of the day, and that's one, and like it's not a dig at Rising to understand what they are, right? Which is the fact that they are a establishment media show. They have a boss that's at the Hill, which is concerned, you know, like with all of the things that other mainstream media outlets are concerned with, and they have their leeway that they're allowed to get away with. But to just assume blanketly, because, you know, I enjoy somebody like Krystal Ball's commentary, and I think that she's a good faith actor that's incredibly smart and wants what a lot of the things that I want, that she's not operating within those some realm of like what she can and cannot say. Yeah, I just think that I think that that's ridiculous. Of course, that there are going to be some stories that they just can't run because they're with the Hill, you know, and that doesn't mean that the show's not worth watching, because they're and you could make the same critique of, you know, something like even like Democracy Now!, right? Like we've seen there's misses. Even though a show that is progressively rooted in those kinds of things, when you get into any kind of like establishment legacy, you know, you're not just a person that's autonomous only to yourself and your viewers, or your collaborator and your viewers. I just think that you're going to have to deal with those kinds of issues. And so the way that they deal with that, there's no longer that private constraint. There's no longer that, you know, capitalist constraint on your decision making and what you intend and what you vocalize to your audience. They have to do it algorithmically, right? Because people don't want to be lied to. They like being fed the truth. And if you let people grow naturally, right? Well, Jordan Chariton pointed this out. This is fucking crazy. I didn't even know this. When he was hosting TYT Investigates, it was their fastest growing show in TYT history when he was hosting it. And he was like, you know, I'm not like a fucking different person now that I'm doing this by myself. Why was it growing like a fucking bullet out of a shotgun? You know, or I guess bullets don't come out of shotguns. But anyway, bullet out of a fucking gun. And now it's just moving at a snail's pace, and we're not getting anybody watching us, you know. Of course, potentially you would see like a 10% decrease because of something like mood shifts in the country. Yeah. But you're not going to see like a 95% fall off unless it's the, you know, big business corporations fucking with you.
Another thing that I think is affecting Status Quo's channel is the pandemic. If you remember, some of the best Status Quo content was at things like big rallies, when they would go up to people and put the microphone in their face and get some pretty crazy content sometimes. And not that stuff stopped happening, but big rallies certainly did. And it definitely did affect their ability to make that kind of on the ground content, again, right up in the, you know, face of an activist or someone at a Trump rally or some shit like that. So again, it definitely some extenuating circumstances, but there's no doubt that YouTube is fucking content creators over in this lane. And really the big problem, I mean, the overall issue with that is that it's a deterrent for younger people to get involved in investigative journalism or in actually speaking truth to power in an independent fashion. Because, you know, you look at this and you hear that and you say like, well, I mean, shit, if I'm interested in having healthcare or providing for like my family or whatever, then it's probably not the most viable path to go down, especially after you hear about how many hours people like Jordan Chariton are putting in only for YouTube to suppress their content at the expense of Fox News and MSNBC, which, you know, peddle in government propaganda and manufacture consent for, you know, foreign wars and austerity and all kinds of horrible things, let alone the fact that they don't even touch stories like Flint. So it really is a huge loss to our culture and society to just not have, or to have a vacuum of real hard hitting, you know, investigative journalism, truth seeking, truth or you know, truth to power kind of commentary and journalism. And you know, despite the fact that we think the Substack model and everything is the way to go ultimately, and it's great to, you know, be independent and all that. I mean, there certainly is a downside to not having any good leftist voices in the mainstream, because unfortunately a lot of people, all their news and commentary comes from the mainstream, like a lot more than you and I probably even can grapple with, just because we're in a bit of a bubble. But most people, you know, they open their phone and scroll through Google News, and if they're on the right wing, you know, it's Fox News and Breitbart and the Daily Caller, and if you're on the left wing, it's HuffPost and Daily Beast and you know, the New Yorker and New York Times, and that's the window of acceptable thought. And